Good morning, everyone. Richard Monette, Active for Life. I'm here with Camilla Knight. Good morning.
Good morning, Richard. Thank you for having me come and speak to you today.
No, this is awesome. So do you want to introduce yourself, what you do, and tell us about your research for our audience at Active for Life?
Yes, for sure. So I'm an associate professor at Swansea University, so that's over in Wales in the UK. So I'm just visiting over in Alberta, which is great because I actually did my PhD at the University of Alberta. So it's really nice to be back here and have a chance to talk about my research. So for the last 10, 11 years, I've been really fortunate to be able to research around parents' involvement in sports and specifically trying to understand parents' experiences and how that might impact on how parents are involved, and then also how we can help parents to better help their children in sport.
From your perspective, can you share with us what you've realized, found out about the relationship between parents and coaches and sport clubs?
Well, the first one's probably not rocket science. The first one is it's complicated, so the research that I've done really highlights some of that complexity. And I think, we would really like to be able to say, if parents do this and if coaches do this and if clubs do this, it's all going to be very smooth and easy for everyone. But the world doesn't work like that, and the relationships definitely don't work like that. But what I have found and what we consistently find is that when time is committed up front, when coaches make a commitment to work with parents and really see parents as an asset, and when parents are in a position where they feel that they can really communicate and engage with coaches, it's just a better experience for everyone. And when we start to think about the role of clubs and organizations, if they can take time to really facilitate engagement between parents and coaches and really look at maybe how their environment, maybe the demands on parents or the demands on coaches might impact on that relationship and try and make change around that, then the whole thing becomes more enjoyable for all of the adults involved, but most importantly also for the children involved.
So when you say that there's a lot, the work put up front really pays off later on, could you give us an idea of what you think could be practical, logical ways of doing this upfront work?
If we were going to sort of simplify it, I guess the key thing is, whether it's at the beginning of a season, if you're in a seasonal sport, or, when relationships are starting, or just on a regular basis, parents and coaches sitting down and talking about, what's the coach's philosophy? What are they hoping that they will do with the athletes coming through this year? And, does that align with what parents want to do? So, very much an open conversation around, well, what are we all trying to achieve here? But you can't just have that conversation once at the beginning and then leave it.
Yeah.
It needs regularly checking in. And really for me, there's some relatively easy ways you can do that regular checking in. So, some of the great coaches that I've seen, every so often they sort of, when they're coaching, they take a lap. And they take a lap to walk around and check in with parents and, make sure that parents know that they're accessible. They also have standard ways for communication. So, this is my email address and this is when it's checked and this is when I want to hear from you. Or they set up sort of parent forums which both parents and coaches can communicate on. So, it's really about committing that time up front to facilitate a range of different sort of ways to communicate.
So there's formal communication channels, there's also informal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it might be challenging for coaches to figure out what are the proper informal ways to communicate with parents. I'll give you an example. I used to coach minor hockey, and in minor hockey the culture seems to be you go through the manager, you don't really talk to the coach
Mm-hmm.
directly. What's your perspective on that process?
So I do definitely appreciate that it's different in different sports. I guess in my experience, we tend to flip it so that it would be you'd go to the coach first, and then if there's a problem that the coach can't solve, then there's a way of moving it further up the chain, and then the coaches would take it to, group coaches and then maybe to a manager. And I think with regard to that informal communication, it is about, as a coach, taking time and thinking, what am I comfortable with? And then being open and honest about that. So, when I've done work talking to coaches about parents, one of the biggest challenges they have is, you know, maybe the texts at the weekend or the phone calls late at night, but they never have a conversation with parents and say, you know, this is when it's okay, you know, or they quite quickly get drawn into responding to those texts, and then you sort of, you know, reiterate that it's okay to do that. So, you know, I think, you know, if coaches spend some time going, okay, what are my boundaries? What am I okay with? And then communicating that, but then sticking to them themselves, right? You can't have a rule that I don't want to be contacted at this time, but then you're doing the contacting as well. Exactly. So it has to be a kind of a two-way thing.
It sounds like you're advocating for specific roles or different roles for coaches and parents. Could you kind of give us an idea of what you believe these roles should be, the prototypical role of the parent and the coach?
In its simplest form, you know, we know the role of the parent really is as the supporter. And when I talk about parents as a supporter, it's not that there's this general set of ways that you should support. It's working out what works for your child. And so that's thinking about, you know, when you're in the home environment, what sort of information your child wants from you. You know, is it just that they really want you to make sure that their kit's ready and the food's prepared, or do they want to engage with you in conversations about, you know, upcoming matches or games? And then thinking around the training environment and, okay, how do we support the training environment? You know, we get them there, make sure that they've got their kit prepared. But then again, does your child want you to watch training? Do they want you to give feedback on training? Do they want you to know what's going on, right? These are all stem from conversations, you know, with the child, and then hopefully also conversations with the coach, because if a coach knows what a child wants and everyone's on the same page, that makes it easier. And then obviously competitions are often where we see some of the more, I guess, challenging split of roles. And I think, again, it's with parents at competitions, it's about recognizing that in that environment you are simply there as a supporter, and, you know, the coach, that's where they're really doing their job. You know, that's where they're taking care of the environment, and you know, having very clear expectations with children and coaches around, you know, leading into a competition or leading into a match, you know, this is what we'd like, and maybe it's 15 minutes before a game, okay, they go off with the coach, and that's sort of where the role stops, you know. And then with a coach, I think it's recognizing that parents are always going to want the best for their children. You know, that's the inherent nature of being a parent, and actually you don't stop being a parent at a competition. And I think sometimes, you know, we try and make an artificial division where, okay, now it's all the coach, but of course the emotions and the feelings of being a parent will still be there. And, you know, a parent, I personally think, still has a right to parent. So if they're seeing something from their child that they don't like, you know, maybe it's behavior, maybe it's, you know, after a competition, of course I think, you know, a parent should be able to do their parenting role, but it's recognizing the boundaries around that. So, you know, whilst the coach is there, whilst the coach is doing their job, you know, the parents, you know, stays a little bit back from that. But from a coaching perspective, I think, you know, the role really is to try and bring a team together. And for me, that team is not just children. That team is children's parents, children's siblings potentially, you know, the people who are all around a child, because they have the biggest impact. And, you know, if as a coach you can start to see that team as broader than just the children that you're coaching, and really embrace it and get everyone on the same page, it's, you know, I think it's going to make life a little easier.
So it's like creating some kind of a community around the team or the club.
Yeah, and you know, I think you made the point earlier that, you know, that can be hard for coaches, and, you know, instinct when things are challenging potentially, or you're not quite comfortable with it, is to stay away from it, is to sort of push it aside. But, you know, the great coaches and the great clubs really function as a community, you know, and it is about bringing people in, and then you can have conversations and things don't escalate, and it's just all becomes a little bit easier.
Two questions. The first one is at Active for Life, we really support the long-term athlete development model, and the basic concept is that you have to provide coaching that is age and developmentally appropriate. How does that change in terms of the way to relate to your kid depending on different ages and stages? Did you see anything? Can you share anything about that with us?
So from a parent's perspective?
Yeah, from a parent's perspective.
It's absolutely tracks across. You know, so using the active, the long-term athlete development plan, in that early phase, during those fundamentals, the role of the parent is reinforcing fun, taking opportunities to be active with your child, really not caring about what they're able to do, and really building perceptions of physical competence, reiterating to your child that they're doing well and they're developing. And then as children move in, as maybe they make more of a commitment to sport, now as a parent, there's actually a part about protecting perceptions of competence and physical competence. Because
what do you mean by that?
So when children start to transition into sort of the 10, 11, 12 kind of age, they become much more aware of what other people are capable of doing, and normative comparison. So
they compare themselves to other kids.
And then, also beyond sport, within schools, suddenly there's more testing and there's more kind of evaluation of people. And that becomes quite a critical point for children to decide to carry on being active or not. So parents can play a really important role there around reinforcing focus on effort and development and helping children to see, what they're improving themselves, rather than, what's going on with their peers and people around them. And I think that's where the focus on, what parents are saying and how they're engaging becomes so important.
So really emphasizing when they get to be 11, 12, 13, really re-emphasizing the growth mindset and the effort and the work done and so on.
Yeah, 100%. And the key thing from a parent's perspective is recognizing that these changes are going to happen, and that when your child first got into sport and maybe they were the superstar or maybe they weren't, and they had their goals and you had your goals and ideas of what you were going to get out of sport. As children progress, naturally those things are going to change, and as a parent they might change too. You might see your child suddenly excelling and suddenly dreams of what they could achieve come into mind, and it's being very cognizant of when those changes are happening. That's a key time for communication. That's when you have to sit down and make the time with your child, and ideally with the coach too, and say, okay, are we still on the same page? Am I giving you what you need? And what's going to help you move forward?
From your experience and your research, could you share with us what's the best way for a parent to make the sport experience of their kids as positive as possible? What would be your top 3 suggestions or tips?
So the first thing, and again, you'll probably be disappointed in the fact these aren't brand new ideas, but the very first thing is recognizing it is your child's journey, and every single child is unique, and the reason I call it a journey is recognizing it's going to change over time. And as soon as you realize that there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, there's going to be transitions, and how your child responds to those, and how your child responds to the great bits and the challenging bits will be entirely unique to your child. It's not your experience, it's not similar to someone else's experience, it's their experience. So, you have to ride it with them, and your journey will, as a parent, will change as well. But then, to allow that to happen, the first thing is making sure parents and children have the same goals and that they're communicating about them regularly. That's the foundation of a successful parent-child relationship.
Does that work at every age?
Yeah, so it's actually, obviously it's tougher when your child's very young.
Yeah.
They probably don't know, but if you said, what do you like about sport? And they're talking about fun, you have to hope that as a parent you're also wanting your child to be involved in fun. And then maybe when they get to 12, your child suddenly goes, I really want to try and make it to the professional level. But if you as a parent really just still want your child to have fun, now there's some tension, or vice versa, So if a child's, actually I just enjoy the social side, and you're thinking they might go somewhere else, that tension arises. So definitely, as children get older, they have a clearer view of what they want to achieve. But also as parents, it's about recognizing that you might think that you know why you want your child involved in sport. You might think you want them to have fun and develop social skills, and then suddenly you're really frustrated because they're losing. Probably you don't quite know, what you were hoping for, and it's probably a time for reflection. But yeah, getting those goals set first is really important, and then the next thing is developing what we call an understanding emotional climate. And really what that is just, as a parent, taking time to continually learn about your child's sport, so you understand what's going on and what might happen next, and how things might change. Understand your child, so what are they going through at school, what are they going through in life, and how might these things come together, and really on a day-to-day basis try and demonstrate that, all right, I'm taking time to try and understand this experience from your perspective. And then the final thing is really around competitions. We know that that's kind of the really challenging part often, and it's about recognizing what works for your child, what do they need from you before, during, and after competitions, having a conversation around it, and then really trying to live to what your child wants. But to do that, we really have to help parents to develop strategies to cope with the emotions, because it's emotional watching children compete, and having some strategies, breathing techniques, making notes, reading the newspaper, listening to music, staying away from people who frustrate you, having some really simple techniques that you've thought through ahead of a competition can really help you as a parent manage that environment as well.
So you're prescribing kind of a toolkit for parents to help them cope with watching, being spectators of their kids' competition?
Yeah, I was just having a conversation earlier, as parenting's incredibly hard, and it's tied up with all sorts of emotions, and aside from maybe the odd music concert, or school play, sport really is the only time where a parent might sit and watch their child fail and have no way of intervening and have no way of helping. And we're not prepared for that. No one sits you down and says, okay, this is what it's like when you're watching your child maybe not doing so well or being disappointed. Sport's relatively unique, in that environment. And so as a parent, arming yourself with some tools and thinking through the scenarios and thinking through how you react in different situations, so that you're a little bit more prepared to cope with those emotions, so that you don't accidentally say the wrong thing or get drawn into behaviors that you wouldn't want to display, really will make life more enjoyable. And I'm a big advocate for sport being enjoyable for parents. If parents are having a good time watching their kids are going to have a better time, and often we create an environment where that's just not the case.
I'm going to share a short story to ask you the last question. A few years ago, I attended a conference put on by the National Hockey League around the World Cup of Hockey, and there was a specialist who talked about all kinds of different things. And then at one point, he asked the room, there was about 300 people in the room, he said, who thinks that parents are the big problem in hockey, i.e. in sport? And I would say that 85% of the room raised their hand. What would you, and these were mostly coaches and people in management position in hockey. So what would you say to these people that believe that parents are the problem in minor sport?
I would say I hear you. It's a comment that I hear a lot. But I would actually say it's not parents that are the problem. I would say it's the environment that we've created. Sport in the, we just saw in Time magazine, sport in the US, a $15 billion industry, and I'm sure it's maybe not so high, but similar across, all countries. We privilege sport in society. We try and make money from parents through sport. We overschedule. We push a lot of things that we know within the research just aren't the best things for child development. So we create this really challenging environment, and then parents are trying to figure it out as they go along, and they get it wrong. But the majority don't. It's just those few who stand out to those 85% who say they're the biggest problem. And so what I would say is, before we start what I call parent blaming, let's look at the culture that we're creating. As a coach, have you really taken the time to talk to parents? As an organization, have you thought about any steps you could do to make it a little bit easier? Can you, this is easier said than done, can you change training times? Can you help parents get to know each other? Can you encourage lift sharing? Have we really thought about all of the things that we can do so that parents can be involved in the right way? I think it's much more than an individual issue with parents. I think it's sort of systemic within the youth sport culture, and we need to consider that, because individual behaviour change isn't going to happen unless we start to change culture.
So really take the time to look at why we're doing what we're doing, rather than just repeating the same cycles and not really asking ourselves the right questions. Well, Camilla Knight, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and enjoy your time in Alberta.
Many thanks for having me.